In this 12-week relationship roadmap episode, I want to start answering the question, what does a healthy long-term relationship look like? We're actually going to get into it, into our framework, into all of it. We're going to take a high-level overview that, well, by the end of listening, you'll walk away better understanding why some of your relationships last long-term while others don't. Before we jump in, let me give a little introduction. Welcome to 12-Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. My name is Pye. My co-host, Dr. Glenn, is in session right now, and this is a roadmap episode. So I don't need him. It's just you and me. Before we kick off, if you guys would like to sign up for the 12-Week Relationships newsletter, you can do so at www.12weekrelationships.com. And if you don't already know by now, Dr. Glenn and I, we very much value simplicity and time, and we value your time. None of us have the ability to spend 20 minutes looking through whatever it is, a video, listening to audio, a podcast, for one little golden nugget of information. So if you sign up for the newsletter, our promise to you is that these are going to be handwritten messages that are useful, insightful, delivered to your inbox each week, and it's not going to be spam. We're not going to do anything like that. Now, let's dive into today's topic, which is beginning to answer the question, what does a healthy long-term relationship actually look like? I'm going to introduce you to a term that you may have heard several times, especially if you've been listening to our other podcast episodes, that we call the SSRM. This is the underlying framework for our process, and it stands for the stupid, simple relationship method. I did warn you earlier that we value simplicity. And I want to go a bit into the name of this. Okay, so I wrote and designed the SSRM, the stupid, simple relationship method. This was probably around 6 to 7 years ago. And it was a 5-year process where I was combining data, everything that I knew, all my case studies, and creating this framework where I was trying to answer this basic question, what does a healthy relationship look like? And I mean, there are thousands of different variables and components, and human behavior is so complex in and of itself. So as a working title, I called it the stupid, simple relationship method. And the thought was that I would, maybe this will become a book or something called Think Stupid Simple. But I had to have stupid simple in my moniker because this was, I guess, the guiding mission statement that I needed in this 5-year process to constantly remind myself that whatever this framework was, it had to be so incredibly simple because otherwise it really wouldn't be that useful. See, if it wasn't stupid simple, wasn't so easy to learn, then you and I wouldn't be able to bring it into our daily lives. If it took years to learn, it's not really going to be that useful at all. So that's why the name Stupid Simple went into that. And then it kind of just stuck. It became sort of the mission for everything that I began doing, including all the work that I was doing with Dr. Glenn 5 years down the road. So while it's called the Stupid Simple Relationship Method, or SSRM as we trademarked, it is by no means not scientific. I know that the name itself doesn't necessarily sound scientific, but this entire thing is rooted in science and psychology. Okay, let's talk about what this diagram, what the framework actually looks like. And this is where, if you're watching this video, I'll actually display the diagram. Well, not me. Our incredible editor, Anthony, is going to display the diagram. But you'll see the stupid simple relationship method. And it looks like, if you're just listening, it looks like kind of like the recycle logo that you might see on a can or bottle that you should be recycling. It has 3 different pieces, 3 arrows that essentially point to each other and make a circle. So when thinking of that 3-piece recycling arrow, I want you to think of the first arrow as desire. This is the beginning point of a relationship. The second arrow is going to be quality time. This is the second piece of a relationship. And the third arrow is sustainability. So thinking of all 3 of those, desire, quality time, and sustainability, they make this nice little closed loop, this circle, that feeds each other. Okay, so this is the basic overview of the SSRM: desire, quality time, and sustainability. Now, within each of these are other components. You can think of subcomponents inside of desire and sustainability, which we'll get into over time. But first, let's just focus on this high-level overview. How in the world does this apply to all long-term relationships? What does it even mean? Here's what it means. Desire. I want you to think of this as your want to spend time with somebody. Most of the time when we think of desire, we think of it as this thing that kind of denotes passion. And it's usually a term that we would see used in romantic relationships. But truth be told, you need to desire any relationship. It doesn't matter whether it's new or a relationship that you currently have. You need to want to spend time with that person, right? So we need to understand what makes up desire. But for right now, before we get into, like I said, later we'll talk about the components. For right now, I want you simply to think of desire as your perceived benefits of a relationship. Okay, so these are the benefits, the things that make you subconsciously want to spend time with somebody. All right, so you have that desire, you have that want. The next step is then quality time, because that want leads you to invite the person, leads you to spend time with the person, whatever it might be, whether it's to hang out, whether it's a phone call. Either way, we spend quality time with the other person, right? And we'll talk about tips on quality time, but honestly, we could break that down into a very simple way of thinking about this. Think of quality time as just basically being meaningfully engaged with another person. And what I mean is, you sitting down with whoever to watch television may be less meaningfully engaged than maybe like dinner and a good conversation, right? So meaningful engagement is going to mean different things to each of you. This is going to be based on your value sets and everything else that we'll get into. But just understand that you're not necessarily spending quality time with someone by just spending time with them. We want to be meaningfully engaged with them. Okay, so that want, your desire, leads you to spend time with somebody, whether it's someone new, whether it's one of your existing relationships. And in spending time with that person, you begin to see, subconsciously again, whether the relationship is sustainable. Now, again, I'm saying subconsciously because none of you are thinking, oh, well, my desire is leading to quality time and this relationship is sustainable. And like nobody thinks that way, right? But what you are noticing is that as you spend time with somebody, maybe you have a tendency to, have differing opinions. And when you share those opinions, you get into arguments. Maybe you find that you really just don't have that much in common and that you're not really that relatable. There's not that much to talk about or to do. It can be a whole variety of reasons. You might just end up losing respect for someone because of something that they did or whatever it could be. But as you spend time with somebody, you'll begin to realize whether the relationship is sustainable or not. So you can think of sustainability as your perceived emotional cost to maintain a relationship. Okay, now remember, we have desire, that is your perceived emotional benefit. I say perceived because you and I, we have different ideas of what those benefits are, right? So these are the benefits that you perceive in a relationship. Well, whatever that is, it makes you want to spend time with somebody. And in doing so, again, there are perceived costs of the relationship. How much effort does it take you to maintain that relationship? And once again, these are perceived because, well, certain things are going to be difficult for you and maybe not so much for me and vice versa. Okay, so how does it work? Well, in a healthy relationship, you should always have desire. That desire should feed your want to spend time with someone else. And in spending time with that person, there is going to be an emotional cost. But that emotional cost is, in general, going to be less than your perceived benefit for the relationship. When this is the case, it's sustainable. In fact, sustainability will actually end up feeding desire. And your desire for the relationship will not only stay the same, it'll actually grow over time. And you'll want to spend more time together. When a relationship is not sustainable, that means that the emotional costs to the relationship are higher than your perceived benefits. And I don't just mean like now and then. We all go through these relationship storms. We have difficulties. It could be a period of a few months. I'm saying consistently. When a relationship consistently is costing you more emotional effort than the benefit that you're getting from it, it's not sustainable. And what happens is your desire is going to begin to wane to the point where, well, you just really don't want to hang out with the person anymore. You don't want to spend time with the person anymore. This is the SSRM, or the stupid simple relationship method, from this high level view. And I'm hoping that even this high level understanding of it helps you to better understand why some relationships will last long term while others won't. Because if we were to put this into context, let's start talking examples. Well, I can ask you to think of any relationship. And by the way, this is the place where I'm going to make another caveat. See, when I designed this process, I didn't want to make a framework. I didn't want to design something that just applied to romantic relationships. My fundamental thesis at the beginning of this, I say the word fundamental too much. So the thing that I wanted to grasp onto in this thesis was that I had a feeling that all healthy long-term relationships followed the same underlying principles. That was the thesis. And the SSRM applies just as much to platonic relationships as it does romantic relationships. Now, this is where most professionals that had heard this at the time kind of scoffed, and I would put Dr. Glenn in that same category, where when I said this and handed him the book, oh, by the way, in my book, my thesis is that the same fundamental framework could apply to all relationships. He kind of laughed. I know what he was thinking in his head. He was like, this guy's, at first I was interested, now this guy's just kind of dumb. But eventually when he read it, he came back and was like, there's actually merit in this. I do want to do my own testing. And he came back to the table going, I believe this is correct. So we're operating from that place, because if we go back to looking at this high level overview of the SSRM, desire, quality time, and sustainability, in looking at it, wouldn't you say that your friendships, platonic relationships, your family relationships, wouldn't you say that desire is important in all of those? Not only the desire to start a relationship, but the desire to actually continue spending time with somebody. I mean, it's equally as applicable to romantic relationships, right? To marriage. How often do we end up in a situation where we're 5 years, 10 years into a marriage, and we recognize the fact that we don't have any desire to spend time with the person that we're with? And we begin to recognize how odd that is and how strange. Like, I don't really want to work on this marriage. I don't know why. Desire is a fundamental piece that has to be maintained in every long-term relationship, because you can say the same thing for your friends, right? How many times have you had a friendship where just slowly over time you fell out of touch, and you may have used sayings like, oh, he or she's changed, or I've changed, and people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, or, it just became kind of long distance and we just fell out of touch. But that's not true, because in truth, you do have long distance friendships that you maintain over time. In truth, what's happening is that we lost the desire for the relationship, that somewhere along the way, we kind of just felt that it wasn't maybe worth the effort. And that would denote a different problem. So, okay, in that context, then our romantic relationships and our platonic ones are actually pretty similar. Then we get to quality time. Again, this component is just as applicable to romance as it is to platonic relationships. In looking at the relationships that you create, and this is what's strange to me, is that when you look at your friendships, you generally are going to have long-term friendships, platonic relationships, with people that you are regularly meaningfully engaged with. And it could be doing anything. It could be the conversations that you have about books. It could be that you both like to watch and analyze movies. It could be sports. You love playing basketball, doing jiu-jitsu together. Whatever it might be, these are your friendships, right? Well, isn't it just as important in romance, in marriage, that you're both meaningfully engaged with activities, with things that you can do together? Yeah, that applies across the board. We need meaningful engagement. That is quality time in any relationship. Okay, then we get to sustainability. Well, once again, this applies to every relationship. I mean, how many times have you had friends where maybe it was just too much drama? I mean, it all started off great and everything. You were friends and you started to hang out and it was good for the first few months, but then you start to realize that, man, we have a lot of disagreements. We argue a lot. We really don't see eye to eye. And slowly you just kind of fall out of touch. Maybe it's because you're not that relatable anymore. You know, you both went to different colleges and kind of have different life goals now. Maybe your friend is a little bit more kind of relaxed in their life and you're very, you know, I guess ambitious and you really want to push forward. And so when you chat and when you talk, you just find that we just don't have that much to say to each other anymore. Well, this exact same thing happens in romantic relationships where you can't see eye to eye, where you're not relatable anymore, where you simply lose respect or admiration for a person, even though you may be with them, even though you may have married them. I mean, all the same things happen regardless. The only difference is this title of marriage or this title of spouse. But that's a title. That doesn't change fundamentally how these relationships work. So as you continue, I want you to remember that the SSRM, it applies to every relationship in our lives. With time, we're going to talk more about the 5 components of desire as well as the 5 components of sustainability. We'll also give you tips on quality time, all of that. For right now, though, I'm hoping that this high-level overview of the SSRM has already helped you to better understand why some of your relationships will stand the test of time while others won't. In simplifying this process and getting down to the SSRM, I also want you to understand kind of some of the effort that went into it. The reason why we've shared our story in this process is because taking something that's inherently complicated and making it simple takes an incredible amount of effort. Woodrow Wilson had this saying that I absolutely love, and so that I don't butcher it, I am going to read just this one line. He said, "If I am to speak for 10 minutes, I need a week for preparation. If 15 minutes, 3 days. If a half hour, 2 days. And if an hour, I'm ready right now." So the whole concept here is, yes, if he has an hour to talk, then I'm ready right now. But the more concise and the more simplified you want something, the more time it's going to take to prepare it. And in the case of, well, the SSRM, which then led to core value focused therapy, this took a tremendous amount of time and effort. First, it took 20 years on my part to go through the experiences. I started studying psychology at the age of 22 to go through my first marriage and have 15 years of those experiences of going into counseling and meeting with one professional after another, reading every book I could find, then spending another 10 years gathering data, and then 5 years compiling 500 case studies into what was an actual framework and beginning to test that framework and write the process. Now that was a 20-year journey, and some of those years were overlapping, just so you don't start adding them up and being like, that's more than 20. It was an overlapping process. But then that led to Dr. Glenn. And when I came to him with this book and framework, I had 20 years of time into it, and then he combined his 20 years of experience, of formal experience, as a trained clinical psychologist who has clinical experience both in a one-on-one setting as well as in a social work setting, who is currently the chair at Whittier College and a tenured professor. It took him to sit down and to actually analyze and to review and to create an actual therapy model around it. That was after he tested it to make sure that it actually held up. I'm kind of chuckling because in that process, one of the pinnacles in this journey for me was when Dr. Glenn came to me. He was in the process of kind of creating core value focused therapy using the SSRM, and I'll explain that in a second. But he came to me and he goes, "Did you know that the SSRM, the stupid simple relationship method, you already have all the latest models of therapy built into this? I can identify 8 to 10 therapy modalities that are already inside of this system." He goes, "Did you do that by design?" And I was like, no, I had no idea. What I was doing was taking everything that I had read, taking all the books, and then as I was combining it with the research and the data, I was simply cutting away all the pieces that didn't apply and trying to get to this distilled version of what I thought was basically a roadmap for healthy relationships. And so that is what the stupid simple relationship method is. It's simply a roadmap to answer that basic question. What does a healthy long-term relationship look like, both platonic and romantic? So that was one of the highlights to me when he came and said that. And I want you to understand that this process is entirely science and data driven. And as we learn more about relationship psychology, we take all those new pieces and we build it in to core value focused therapy. And this is where I also want to explain the difference between the SSRM and CVFT. So like we've said previously, that there's two acronyms that you'll hear us frequently using. The SSRM, which you already know, Stupid Simple Relationship Method, and then CVFT, or Core Value Focused Therapy. These are the two trademark processes that we developed. Core Value Focused Therapy is, by and large, Dr. Glenn's process. See, when I handed him this book, at the time it was called Stupid Simple Relationships, I handed him this book, and who knows what it will be called when it's actually released, don't ask me. But inside of it was the SSRM. It's this roadmap. It's a structure for what a healthy relationship actually looks like. It's an answer to that question. But it's not a therapy model, because as a roadmap, it's basically pointing out where all the different locations and pieces are. But it's not a guide that's actually taking you through step by step. Therapy is basically when you apply an actual guide, a process to this underlying roadmap, to this structure. And that's what Dr. Glenn did. So when he came into the process, he took the SSRM, he tested it, said this actually works. Then he applied an actual therapy model, which we ended up calling Core Value Focused Therapy, because it's therapy that focuses around core values, which is the root of the SSRM. So Core Value Focused Therapy, that's the actual therapy model. This is the step-by-step guide, the process that we take our clients through. The underlying backbone or structure of CVFT is the SSRM, or the Stupid Simple Relationship Method. It's the roadmap that answers the question of what does a healthy long-term relationship look like? The cool part, and I'd say the goal of CVFT, is to turn you into your own relationship expert. That's what we want for our clients. We don't want therapy to become this subscription where you just have to always continue going. We want our clients to walk away going, I can understand, I can diagnose the problem, I can find my own solution. You can be your own expert. And some of these clients will choose to come back to us so they have an ongoing sounding board, so they can get better tools, tips, and maybe even vent frustrations, whatever it might be. But it's their choice at that point to do so, because many others will simply go off and say, well, now I can figure out my own solutions. I can find additional resources that best fit my needs. This is one of the big things that when it comes to relationships, the SSRM is a roadmap to say this is what a healthy relationship should look like, but it's not what your relationship should look like. See, the way that you apply this roadmap to your own life is going to mean that your relationships, your healthy relationships, are going to look different from mine, because they're going to be based on your values versus my values. We're not artists. And what I'm saying is that all of us, we tend to look at a healthy relationship from the standpoint of artists, and each of us are painting this picture based off the experiences and everything that we bring to the table, our values, our trauma, our everything. And we go and we paint this picture, and then we apply it to someone else, and we say that this is what your healthy relationship should look like, and I would show you my painting. But that's my painting. That's my vision. And your vision is your own, and who's to say which one of these is right or wrong? In fact, this is often the case why relationship advice can tend to be myopic, and this includes advice that you'd even receive from, say, professionals and experts, because we all learn what we learn, and we start applying that knowledge and painting this canvas and then showing it to someone else going, this is what your version of that should look like. And a lot of experts are doing this as well. They're choosing these anecdotal stories and kind of painting this picture, albeit maybe their canvas has more colors than yours would have. But in the end, I don't want you to think of Dr. Glenn and I, or of 12-week relationships, as artists. We're not trying to paint you a picture of what your healthy relationship should look like. You can think of us kind of like eye doctors. The SSRM, well, the goal of it, CVFT, this entire process, we're simply aiming to improve your vision, to help you see your world better through your own set of eyes, to help you define what does your healthy relationship look like. That's it for this episode of The Roadmap. I hope you all enjoyed. Once again, you guys can sign up for the newsletter at 12weekrelationships.com. And in the meantime, well, if you guys would like to help us out, we would absolutely love for you to hop on to the iTunes store and leave a review for the podcast. Leaving a review for the 12-Week Relationships podcast helps us to grow the platform and bring more of these services to each of you. In the meantime, we'd of course love for you to subscribe. And if you need any type of one-on-one coaching, you can sign up for the waitlist at 12weekrelationships.com as well. Until next time, peace.